Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Skiff Wanderer Podcast. Now, we're in the middle of Lost and Wandering Volume 2, but I'm kind of bringing you guys an emergency situation report of something going on here in the Texas coast that just want to get as much information out to as many people as we can so that we can get as much help as we can. So joining me today is Brian Donovan, the president and founder, one of the founders of the North Texas Chapter of CCA, who's also become a pretty good friend over the last few years, and I think we've spent way too many times at city council meetings together. And
yeah, we see each other at meetings more than we see each other. It's like we're in AA.
But before we dig into what's going on with Baffin Bay, which is the main topic we're going to talk about, just Brian, if you can just give us like a little bit of background, because you've got a long history of working with conservation organizations as well as being on the water.
Yeah, I've been fishing down here since I was 10 years old. Just kind of grew up on the coast. It was our playground. I grew up duck hunting and fishing down here, and managed to move down full time to Rockport a couple of years ago, and still remain the president of the North Texas Committee despite that. We just have Zoom meetings and everything, and I was fortunate to grow up being mentored by a bunch of adult men when I'm 10, 12, 15 years old that were very big into conservation and taught me some very important lessons about everything you see here is constantly in jeopardy, and it can go away, in a twinkling if you are not willing to stand up and fight for it. And so I've done that, pretty much my whole life. In 1997, I founded the Frisco Committee at Ducks Unlimited, which was for a big run, was one of the president's list committees, which is the top 100 committees in the country. Raised a bunch of money for DU. Started getting heavily involved with CCA when the North Texas area, outside of 635, all the suburbs, the huge suburbs up there, Frisco and Plano and McKinney and Prosper, were so far away that they weren't getting a lot of traction with people coming down from the northern exurbs to go to like the Dallas banquet. And so they formed a new committee. And I got the email that they were going to try to form this committee up, and went to that, met a bunch of really great guys. Some of them had come from long history with the Dallas committee, very accomplished fundraisers. And we formed this committee, and I managed to get myself elected president, and here we are.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about today that you mentioned was the guys that mentored you, talking about things can go away in the twinkling of an eye, and this whole situation that we're going to start digging into in Baffin Bay with these desal plants, that was literally almost overnight for most of us. Went from not knowing anything was going on to they've already started and they're already dumping water.
That's exactly right. It they opened the entities behind this are the South Texas Water Authority and a company called Seven Seas Water Group. And Seven Seas Water Group invented the concept of water as a service, which is we will come in as a private entity. We will set up these treatment plants, and you will subscribe to this plant for a 20 or 30-year contract, which is how they make their money, without any cost to the city other than what they're producing. So when they begin to produce, they begin to get paid. And so that water as a service model you got to hand it to them. It's a pretty smart model. That's how you prevent having to, do bond issuances to cover basic infrastructure. And the man that runs that company, his name is Henry Charabay. He's the CEO of Seven Seas Water Group. And the way that this whole thing came to our attention was Shane Bonneau at CCA posted a video, and that video was for the Texas Senate Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs. And in that video, Henry Charabay, his quote, it's a little long, but every bit of it, each sentence gets more amazing. And he said, our most recent contract for a brackish water treatment plant with a capacity of 4 million gallons a day with the SWTA in Kingsville will produce a discharge stream with a projected quality of 12,000 TDS, which is a measure used to determine the salinity of water. This stream will join the stream from our desalination plant in Alice, directed into Baffin Bay, which suffers from a high level of salinity with more than 42,000 TDS. Our discharge will be beneficial to the bay as it will dilute the hypersaline body of water, ultimately reducing the salinity and thereby allowing the revitalization of the bay while providing fresh drinking water to citizens further inland. The larger our plant were to become, also for the regional water supply and the related discharge, the greater the actual benefit for Baffin Bay and the environment. Which is just a spectacular run of
it sounds good.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
it's
if you don't understand Baffin Bay, it sounds good. And so I know a lot of you guys that listen to this podcast aren't necessarily in Texas and you're outside of Texas. So I want to give you like a quick rundown on Baffin Bay. If any of you listening have ever thought about targeting trophy sea trout, there are two places in this country that you are going to hear about when you go down the rabbit hole of how to catch a trophy sea trout. The first one is Mosquito Lagoon in Florida. And the second one you're going to come across is either going to be the Laguna Madre or Baffin Bay. And Baffin Bay, it's basically like a right turn off the Laguna Madre. I mean,
yeah, it's at the top of the lower Laguna Madre.
Yeah. And so that whole area, it is completely cut off from ocean access. There's most of the tidal currents that you see are wind driven, and it holds some of the best trout. I mean, most of the guides that we talked to last week, and we're at the meeting that we were at, they won't let you keep trout in Baffin Bay.
Correct.
Because they are going out to catch 30-inch trout.
They are there for 30-inch trout, and there are a number of guides. You know, you've got Jay Watkins, you've got Chad Paterick. Jay fishes the lower during winter, which is the trophy trout season. Chad fishes Baffin, and he fishes it year-round. And, a little bit about the natural history of Baffin Bay. That bay has been flooded since the beginning of the Holocene at the end of the Ice Age. So it's 11,000 years since that bay was inundated. So it evolved as a closed hypersaline bay system. There are no, for you guys that are listening, they're outside of Texas and aren't familiar with Baffin Bay, the closest cuts to the Gulf of Mexico to Baffin Bay are approximately 40 miles in either direction, north or south. And so there is no exchange of Gulf water to lower salinity. It is a very salty bay. But because of that, it's the only place in America that has what are called serpulid worm reefs. And that's a worm that makes a calcareous reef. And so you'll hear about the quote unquote boulders in Baffin. Those are actually basically limestone reefs that these worms have made over millennia. And that provides extremely important ecosystem services and structure that produce these enormous trout that everybody is trying to catch. And those things only exist there because of the hypersalinity of the bay. It's a very special, very unique ecosystem that anything that dilutes the salinity of that bay is going to damage very badly.
Correct me, because I don't know if this analogy works. Like to me, it also feels like, you watch what happens every time they have a massive outflow of water from Lake Okeechobee and you get the red algae blooms.
Sure.
And I don't know enough of the science to know, like, hey, that's going to happen here. But, I know that, like, we're going to end up with just between the briny water and the chemicals and everything, we're going to end up with dead zones that aren't going to leave. Like, that water's stuck.
It's in the not only are they talking about diluting Baffin Bay, they're talking about diluting it with groundwater that has a different saline profile than the salts and minerals that are in Baffin Bay. So not only are you diluting the salinity of the bay, you're introducing new minerals, new salts into this bay that don't naturally exist. And of course, those never leave.
Right.
Your water evaporates, your salts stay behind, they continue to concentrate, which is how you wind up with a hypersaline bay. And now you've changed the profile of the mineral content of that bay, which is not going to work well for your seagrasses, for your serpulid worms, for your trout and everything. And, Baffin at one point, and Baffin does face some serious challenges right now. Environmentally, the biggest problems that you're having are runoff from things like agricultural and municipal fertilizer. You have like septic tank discharge that winds up in the bay. And so there are some water quality problems in Baffin Bay. But through HRI, the Heart Research Institute in Corpus Christi, there is an effort to begin mitigating these non-point source pollution into Baffin Bay to improve the water quality and bring that bay back to where it used to be, 20, 30 years ago.
So the desal plants, there's one of them is currently dumping into Baffin Bay, correct?
It is producing 2.775 million gallons a day, and the discharge from that is going into Baffin Bay. And the way the path that it is taking is it's going into San Diego Creek, thence to San Fernando Creek, thence to Baffin Bay, Alazan Bay, and Coyote Grillo. And like I said, Henry Charbet is on film testifying before the Texas Senate saying that their intention is to link the Alice plant and the Driscoll plant together so that they have a single discharge line. And so there's a number of problems with this. One of the problems with this is that Senator Chris Perry, who is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs, after Henry Charbet has said his little spiel about how he's going to help Baffin Bay, Senator Perry replied, "I think it's important, your example of the environmental aspect of you're actually going to help the bay that's over salinity. I don't know how many situations that applies to, but I think it's pretty cool that you're actually going to help where you're at." Well, here's the problem. Senator Chris Perry represents the 28th District of Texas, which is in the Panhandle. He was born in Abilene. He went to high school in Sweetwater. He attended Texas Tech, and he currently resides in Lubbock. So his knowledge of hypersaline bay systems may be a little limited.
Just slightly.
And I don't think Henry Charbet's out there slinging double Ds for trout either. I don't think he understands exactly what he's talking about. So you have got people who are using, sort of a broad knowledge base of how bay systems work, and they're applying it to a very special and unique use case, thinking that knowledge carries, and it absolutely does not.
So let me ask this then. The Driscoll plant is the one that we just caught wind of.
That is correct.
The Alice plant's up and running.
The Alice plant is up and running. The Alice plant, right now, each straw that they put into the ground, each pump that they put into the aquifer produces approximately 1.5 million gallons a day. And it's very simple to just put another straw. And those straws are about as far away from one another as you and I are sitting. I mean, they're 8-10 feet apart. And each one of those is another 1.5 million gallons that comes out. They can expand the actual treatment facility. So the way that the desalination is working, you're pumping brackish groundwater out of the Jasper aquifer, is the aquifer that they're hitting. It runs through a reverse osmosis filter, and you are recovering fresh water, and you're in the process of doing that, you're concentrating the dissolved salts from about 3,500 TDS to about 12,000 TDS. And then that is discharged straight into a creek that runs right into Baffin Bay. And Baffin Bay, the average natural freshwater inflow for Baffin Bay is 4 cubic meters a second. It's a trickle. And you're now talking about the Driscoll plant. They have said that they can expand that plant to 40 million gallons a day, which is going to be 60 or 70 million gallons a day of discharge.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that's 40 million gallons of water, and then your treated water comes out. So you're going to, by literal orders of magnitude, increase the inflow into that bay, and now it is non-native salts and minerals that are going into the bay, and it's diluting the salinity of the bay while introducing new minerals. It's a disaster. I mean, it's just a disaster.
But at that flow rate, like, we're not talking about just killing Baffin Bay anymore.
You could see, it would not surprise me to see effects. I mean, all along the backside of Padre Island, which is the barrier island that protects Baffin Bay, up and down, especially down into the top of the lower Laguna Madre, you could screw up the land cut. You could probably have effects as far as the top of the lower Laguna Madre. That's conjecture on my part.
Yeah.
But you're right. But the volume of water they're talking about pumping, if they ramp the Driscoll plant up to maximum capacity, it could be much more serious than just Baffin Bay. It could be that entire part of the coast. Could be. And so it's you just, like I said, you have a CEO that thinks that he is helping the Bay, and you have a Senate subcommittee that thinks that, it's giving him high fives and telling him that, he's doing a great job. And the really infuriating thing is, while we were at that meeting in Kingsville talking to the South Texas Water Authority, and for you guys that were not there, there were a good 50 captains there. And no one spoke in favor of the plant. Everyone spoke against it. And there have been no environmental studies for this. They right now do not have any permitting to discharge into Baffin Bay. And so even though Henry Charbet testified before a Senate committee that their intention is to link the outfall of both the Driscoll and Alice plants and pump them directly into Baffin Bay, the president of the South Texas Water Authority on KI on July 11th said that we understand the community has concerns. This is still in the early stages. There's not permitting because we're not at that point yet. We're asking a lot of the same questions the community has shared. Well, you're not. I mean, you're just you're not.
That's what's been I guess has blown my mind with this whole thing is how I mean, is the system? Oh God, here we go. Is the system that broken that they can do this without a single permit?
No, there will have to be permitting, and in the early stages of this, when we as the conservation community, number of different organizations, TCA, CCA, the very first thing that you do is start tearing the TCEQ website apart looking for permitting on this thing, and there's literally no trace of this plant. There's no permitting, and they've just on the 11th admitted that they have no permitting for any of the discharge yet. And so there's one way that you can fight them. You can litigate. You can force public hearings. You can force a public comment period to try to get as many people as possible to speak out against this thing. But the big one is that right now the Corpus Christi, the way that you get to 40 million gallons a day with this Driscoll plant is that water's got to go somewhere. Somebody's got to buy it, and the somebody is the city of Corpus Christi, which of course right now is in terrible, dire straits for water. And the majority of that water goes to industrial use because, we have so many refineries and chemical plants and lithium refinery that Tesla's building. And so the need for fresh water is never ending. And they have until September to make a decision as to whether or not they are going to buy water from this new desalination plant. And if they decide to sign a contract with 7Seas and the South Texas Water Authority, then we've got a much more serious problem on our hands because now you have demand to ramp that thing up as big as it can go. And so on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, July 15th, there is a city council meeting for the city of Corpus Christi. And we're going to show up in force and speak against this thing. And one thing that people need to be aware of is the city of Corpus Christi is apparently aware that this is coming. And so they have changed the rules of the game just last week and made it to where if you would like to speak before the city council, you have to be signed up by 10:30 the morning of the meeting. So your deadline to get signed up is 10:30 a.m. On Tuesday the 15th. And you can sign up online, but you have to do it if you want to make public comments.
And I'll put a link down below so you guys can go and sign up if you want to.
Link in bio.
Hopefully we'll see you guys Tuesday. One of the things that's I've been scratching my head over since last week is how are they able to build this thing?
And that's a great question. And, I alluded to it earlier. I said the infuriating thing about that STWA meeting is that while we're there, the South Texas Water Authority board had literally just come from a press event with KI News where they had already popped a straw in the ground and pulled the cork on that thing to show that they have free-flowing water and not mud. And those guys came to the meeting and it acted like, well, we haven't even done anything yet. Right. And so after all of the public comments were given, somebody in the back of the room just asked, is there a contract for this thing? And the board got very, very quiet, and they gestured at their in-house counsel. And their lawyer stood up and began dissembling. But the punchline was, yes, not only is there a contract, but it was signed in August of 2024 with no public input whatsoever. And there was no environmental study. There was no public comment period. There was nothing. They just signed a contract for water as a service with Seven Seas Water Group. And so the day of that meeting, they have turned their first well on, and of course the press coverage is fawning about how this is this is going to be kind of a silver bullet solution for all of Corpus Christi's water woes. And that was on July 8th, and then July 11th they do the follow-up, which is there's a little pushback here. Not everybody's super pumped about this. And so when we began to ask questions about, is it a memorandum of understanding or is it an actual contract? It's an actual contract. Well, can we see the contract? Well, you're going to have to FOIA that, Freedom of Information Act. And the way that process works is that you would give the FOIA to South Texas Water Authority, and because they have a second party involved, after they release the contract, it first goes to Seven Seas. And Seven Seas can redact that contract to protect their intellectual property. Well, since they're the originators of the concept of water as a service, there's no telling how much of that contract will be redacted. It's going to be a lot of it. But after that contract goes to Seven Seas, it goes to the Texas Attorney General, who can also further redact. And then it gets released to whoever has made the request. We're going to, through the FOIA process, as much of that contract as can be discovered will be discovered, and we'll see what it looks like. But yeah, I mean, it's everything. It's just unfortunately, this is sort of the nature of the game down here. It's the permitting agencies are heavily pro-industry. They're very yes to everything, without a lot of deep concern for the environmental consequences, because the bottom line is, and there's no way to get around it, Texas has a water problem, like statewide.
Yeah.
And I know that with as devastating as the floods in the hill country were, and North Texas has had tons of rain, and you have areas in Texas that do get a significant amount of water. But it always comes too much, too fast, at the wrong time, and in the wrong places. The lakes that feed the Corpus Christi, the coastal bend area, right, are at 16% capacity or something in that neck of the woods right now between two lakes, and they continue to permit and invite every heavy industrial water user in the world to come down here. Plants that will drink millions of gallons a day. And the ratepayers are the ones that are asked to pay the consequences of the lack of water. You can't wash your boat, can't flush your engine, can't wash your car, can't water your yard, can't. But the big industrial users are not facing any restrictions right now.
Most of us that live down here are not against these desal plants. We're not against bringing more fresh water into this area. What we're against is destroying, for a lot of us, our means of living in the process. So, for example, they wanted to put a desal plant in Corpus Christi Bay, and they wanted the intake and the outflow to be in Corpus Christi Bay. And Corpus Christi Bay is not as landlocked as Baffin Bay, but it still does not get a lot of tidal movement. So if you're sitting there in South Carolina and you're like, well, you know, watching a 6 foot, 7 foot king tide, and you're watching your bays flush in and out. So to put that in perspective, 1 foot of tidal movement in a day is a lot of tidal movement for
100%.
us. We see maybe 6 inches.
Yeah, you're you know, especially, you know, you skiff guys, you know, watching the back lakes and everything. 2 inches of water can mean the difference between being able to get somewhere and not being able to get somewhere. And you've really got to watch the tide because you can get a problem real fast.
But the reason I brought up the inner harbor, the Harbor Island desal plan is, you know, we went to the city council, we talked to them about it, and they moved the inflow and outflow offshore.
That is correct. And CCA had a very heavy hand in getting that win, in talking the Port of Corpus Christi as the entity behind the Harbor Island desalination plant. It's if you look at a map of Texas, it's in a place called Port Aransas, which is a small coastal drinking and fishing town. It's a great place. It's right on. It's the only outlet to the Gulf for many miles in either direction. And all of the shipping traffic that comes out of the Port of Corpus Christi, which is 15 miles away, comes up the ditch and out through the Lydia Ann Channel at the jetties at Port Aransas, and they're going to build a desal plant right there. And they were going to just dump the water right there in the intersection of the Lydia Ann Channel and the Intracoastal Waterway, and a lot of that salt was going to carry down into Corpus Christi Bay and have dire ramifications for Corpus Christi Bay. And so the port finally agreed to take the intake 1.2 miles off the north jetty, I believe, and the outfall is going to be 1.8 miles offshore off the south jetty. And so you're going to have concentrated salt brine. This is not brackish groundwater. This is Gulf water. So your brine is much saltier. It's a salt slurry. But it's going to be pumping into the Gulf of Mexico. So right locally around that outfall, you're going to have some hypersalinity, but it's diluting into the Gulf of Mexico. And the intake, I've been told by a credible source, is going to be a giant concrete block. There's going to be some outstanding cobia habitat, and very accessible.
So we need to get the numbers for that.
Yeah. So drop a pin. So yeah, that was a huge win. You're now going to have desalination that's done in a responsible way and is going to really move the needle for the water supply. But the brackish water desalination plants will also move the needle on the water supply, but extremely irresponsible method of disposing of that salt brine.
Yeah, and there's been there are proposed methods to take care of that salt brine.
There is, and so sort of the case study for this is the K. Bailey Hutchison desalination plant, which is El Paso of all places, has the biggest desalination plant in Texas. And so they have brackish groundwater, but they also have a rock formation at like 4,000 feet that has no water in it. And so they can do deep well injection and put that water back in the ground where it'll never be seen again. There are no environmental ramifications to doing that, and that's how they're disposing of their salt brine. I would be talking out of turn if I told you I knew enough about the geology here to say whether deep well injection is an option here. Mm-hmm. But it is far and away the preferred method of disposing of that salt brine if you can't put it in the Gulf.
But it costs more.
Of course. Yeah. And theoretically, you could, these plants in Alice and Driscoll, you could probably dispose of that water in the Gulf, but now you got to go across Padre Island. You got to run a big long pipe. I mean, this is a major, major infrastructure undertaking. So there's no way they're ever going to entertain that idea. So we've got to find something to do with this in an environmentally responsible way, or not have it.
Right. And maybe convince Corpus Christi to quit selling all our water.
That's the quiet part out loud right there.
Sorry.
Is Corpus Christi needs to see that the environmental consequences of this far outweigh the benefit of bringing 30 million gallons of water a day, 40 million gallons of water a day online. The most important thing is Peter's going to do everything in his power to rush this thing out tomorrow, and hopefully you guys listen to it before 10:30 on Tuesday. And for those of you do and are within reasonable driving distance of Corpus, then by all means show up, and let's have a bunch of people give public commentary that this is not in the best interests of the ecosystem for the coastal bend, and this is not the way to do it.
And so that meeting is going to be 5:30 p.m. Tuesday at City Hall, Corpus Christi City Hall. I'll put a link down below to where the City Hall is located. If you want to speak, you've got to sign up by 10:30 a.m., and I'll put a link down below so you guys can see that. And yeah. Like Brian said, I hope we see you guys all there, and come ready to speak out and hopefully save this place. And if you're listening to this, you got any questions, send them my way, and I can figure out how to get them answered correctly. And if you have connections with any fishing industry brands, companies that want to get involved, send them my way, and I'll get them in touch with the right people to get all the information they need to help us out.
Yeah, industry support would be amazing. I mean, we just managed to get Mike Lee talked out of the idea of selling public lands, and a lot of that was due to heavy industry influence. There was not an outdoor brand in the country that didn't in some way say no.
Yeah. So yeah, if you got connections at brands that can that want to help us out, reach out and we'll make it happen. But we have to go to a planning meeting to fight this right now.
That's exactly right. We're going to go down to Riviera, Texas, down there on Baffin Bay, and everybody that's going to speak Tuesday night, we're all going to get on the same page.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you for your time.
I appreciate it, Pete. Thanks.